Hello, so this presentation is we're going to be focusing on India and the cultural aspects of India. My name is Mark Rodriguez. I'll be your presenter for today. As you can see by the lively picture, you can see that the Indian culture is very full of a lot of history and culture and dynamics, and we will be talking about that today. And so this next section, this is the agenda, and these are specifics on what we'll be covering today. We're looking at geography and description of India, the key moments in history in India, cultural values, cultural concepts, cultural factors in communication, and then developing cultural sensitivity and leadership competency in India. And then the last one is my recognition and analysis of how my personal biases influence my understanding of the Indian culture. So we're going to be talking about the geography and description of India. It is actually located in Asia. It's positioned, surrounded by a lot of land up north, which is basically you're looking at Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Burma. And then on the south, you have the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and also the Gulf of Mannar and other little countries that are surrounding around here as well. So we're talking about the size of India. We're looking at 3.2 million square kilometers. 2.9 million is land, and 313,000 is water. It's the seventh largest nation in the world, and the population is 1.2 billion. It's the most populated nation on Earth. So the next part is languages spoken. So there's a wide variety of languages that are spoken. There's hundreds of Indo-European languages and dialects. In southern India, basically the Tamil people, if you're talking about the Dravidian languages, native to Sri Lanka. And then you have the basics that we all know about: Hindu, Urdu, Bengali, Jarata, Sanskrit. And then English is the common language across the whole continent. So in this part, we'll be talking about the key history moments in India. There's a lot, so I'm only going to touch base on a couple on this slide. The big ones here that we're looking at is 2500 BC, the Dravidian civilization was established. And then in 1400, the Vedas, the Hindu scripture, was written. And 518 BC, Persians invaded Pakistan. And in 326 BC, Alexander the Great moved into India. And then we continue on to 320 AD, Gupta Indian dynasty reunited India, and that was called the Golden Age of India. In the 700s, Muslim armies came from Arabia and they invaded India. And then in 1500s, 800 years later, Christianity was introduced to India. And in 1876, Queen Victoria was given the title Empress of India by the British Parliament. 1858, British government ruled India. Now we move on to the 1900s. In the 1905, British government divided Bengal into separate Hindu and Muslim sections. In 1920, Mohandas Gandhi became the leader of the Indian independence. And then in 1939, UK declared war on Germany, World War II, and India was automatically involved in World War II. And then we go into 1940. So by this time, we're looking at World War II, right? And Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded a new country to be formed in India for Muslims, which is now called Pakistan. In 1946, the British government agreed to grant India their independence. In 1948, Gandhi was assassinated. In 1950, the new Indian constitution was ratified, and Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Indian prime minister. And so cultural values, because British occupied India for so many years, they actually shared a lot of common traits. For example, they shared the game of cricket. They both enjoy tea. You look at Oxford and Cambridge elite, they share that. There's an admiration for English literature, specifically English literature. And then English language was used as a vehicle between culture and administration. And so we're looking at, when we look at Lewis's books, right, we're looking at India falls into the cultural values of multi-active. That means they're extrovert, they're impatient, they're very talkative, and inquisitive. And also they plan the grand outline only. They don't spend too much time on specifics, and they do several things at once, and they work any hours. And the last thing is they're not very punctual. And so to continue on the cultural values, they're a family-oriented ethnicity. The honor of both family and group, material success and creativity. They're very good problem solvers, risk takers, and experiments. They have arranged marriages, and they're loyal to a group, especially a professional group. And they have a do-it-yourself mentality, and they're very savvy at business. With cultural concepts, we're looking at leadership and status, right? So Indians accept a hierarchical system within its obligations and duties. The boss must be humanistic and initiate promotions for his subordinates. And when it comes down to family business, the eldest of the family is the one that's being groomed to take over the family business. They love passing on businesses from one generation on to the next. Okay, so when talking about space and time, because India is the most heavily populated country in the world, it gets very crowded. So we're looking at bus lines being very chaotic. The city may appear to be very chaotic as well. Women are clearly subordinate to men. And then also time is cyclical because opportunities will inevitably reoccur because they believe in reincarnation. And so the next part we're talking about is cultural factors and communication. In this first part, Indian English is old-fashioned, very flowery and verbose. They're very generous in praise and reluctant to criticize. That's connected to bad karma. That's the reason why. Then they're far from being a class in society, and groups will often sink or swim together. As far as listening, they're willing to listen at length, enable a relationship to develop, and really friendly people. And so we're talking about behavior at meetings and negotiations. You want to remain polite while modifications are proposed and repackage energetically to reach out in agreement. They hate turning down any business. They love negotiating. And also have very few superiors. They're clever at buying and selling, and they're disappointed if you don't engage in bargaining with them first. They actually say it as an insult. And so when things, at some points, remember when you're negotiating with the Indian culture, they're very skillful and can often fool you. Understand their needs and objectives, and be humble at all times. Don't come across as like arrogant. Avoid sarcasm or any irony. Focus on the relationship because they see this more than the specific deal itself. And Indians will accept losses if they mean future gains. And the last thing is their negotiating concept is win-lose, but they are very flexible. All right, so the next section we're talking about suggestions for developing cultural sensitivity for India. So Indians tend to complain openly about injustices during the colonial period. I'm just going to go over a few of these. They're very reasonable and solicitous and flexible. Learn basic facts about Mahatma Gandhi. Knowledge of Hinduism would help. Do not risk joking with them. They tend to take things a little too serious sometimes. And to continue with sensitivity, learn to cope with Indian bureaucracy. It can be slow and tedious. Learn how to function within its constraints and restrictions. Try not to be judgmental. Show sympathy and empathy. And truth has many aspects for them, so they believe there is no absolute truth, and facts and appearances are subject to negotiation. Recognize and respect the unwritten word, and to them oral agreements hold more weight than documents. And this last part is actually my implicit biases on the Indian culture. I have a lot to learn about the Indian culture. My only exposure to the Indian culture is one friend that I have, and then the internet. And I find that, I think, when I compare my previous assessment to this, I think I would side more towards the white American over the Indians from India, and it's only because it's my lack of exposure to the culture, and that's not because of any prejudice I have, it's just that that's all I know.